Good afternoon. My name's Sham Karim. I'm Telecom Solutions Director at Infobip, and I'm here to talk to you about Infobip's digital identity as a service. So this presentation really is about talking how telcos can really be digital identity enablers for the entire ecosystem. So before we go into the details of the solution, I wanted to paint the picture of the background of what's really happening that's making this a very important and relevant innovation in the market. So COVID has forever changed the digital landscape. As we know, there's been a huge shift towards consumer digitalization. And what this slide is showing us is some fascinating information from McKinsey, which shows us the different or new shopping behaviors since COVID-19. So what you're seeing here is a tremendous shift to online shopping across all territories. We see massive growth in India and Indonesia, which is perhaps to be expected. But what I find particularly interesting is also if you look at markets like the US, Spain, Italy, France, and so on, we're seeing above 50% of new shopping behaviors from those consumers. And what's also fascinating is the intent to continue. So what we're seeing here is intent to continue with these new behaviors after COVID. So where you see anything that's grey or blue, what you're seeing is a positive intent to continue with these new behaviors by consumers. So the only ones that you're seeing negative growth in is the dark grey. Everything else here is positive, and the darker the blue, the more positive the intent to continue with this new behavior. And mobile is really at the center of this shift online. So we can see here that on a global basis, in 2020, 68% of all internet traffic went via mobile, 71% if you include tablet. And so mobile really is at the heart of this changing landscape. Now, what does this mean? We have a couple of challenges here caused by this massive growth. One of them is fraud. So we're seeing tremendous growth in fraud, almost 35% increase in fraudulent attempts, which is showing that criminals are more active in breaking through digital channels. We also see that suspected fraudulent digital transaction attempts against businesses have increased 46%. That's coming from TransUnion. And fraud contributed by the mobile channel is increasing significantly, as you can see in this graph. And right at the heart of this problem, particularly when we're talking about identity, is identity theft. So in 2020, nearly 1.4 million reports of identity theft. That's twice as many as in 2019. And if you look at experts in the industry, they're all saying that they are predicting a continued growth of identity theft risk. And just to be clear, when we're talking about identity theft, what we're talking about is fraudsters somehow getting control of a person's digital identity through various different means, including phishing, vishing, common theft, hacking, and so on. And they're using these identities, these stolen identities, to open new accounts, to take over existing accounts. So we have a real dilemma in the digital industry, and that's security versus customer experience. So we can lock out the fraudsters, but we have to be very careful that in locking out the fraudsters, we're not making it so difficult to transact online that the actual customer suffers. So there's this dilemma between how high do we put the barrier to ensure that there's not a fraudster, as compared to how do we make something as frictionless as possible for the end user so they can transact. At the same time, we have a real challenge with digital inclusion. So we know that almost half of the planet's population doesn't have a form of digital identity. And in this new world where everyone's switching over to digital channels, something I like to think of as digitization or digital transformation of the consumer, there's a real risk that those that currently don't have digital identity, which tends to be the poorest and most deprived people on the planet, have a real risk of becoming even more disintermediated, to fall behind faster and deeper than ever before. So we have these dual problems. We have a security issue, we have a fraud issue, and then we have this disintermediation, this digital or financial inclusion problem. And telcos really are perfectly positioned to solve both of these channels. They have highly trusted relationships with both the consumer and the enterprise, and they have this position to be able to provide services to both in a trust framework, if you like. So providing secure and frictionless onboarding and authentication and verification services on behalf of the consumer to and towards the enterprise. So why are telcos in this position? Why is it such an interesting position for them? So if we look at telcos and customer data, they have a really unique view of the consumer. Huge reach, unprecedented reach into the consumer, daily interactions, regulated KYC. And this consumer set, this data set, can be leveraged to allow the consumer to request that the data that the telco has on them can be shared with other digital service providers. Why do they want to do this? Because they want a seamless way to be able to prove who they are. If they want to open a bank account, if they want to open a credit card, access a loan or a microloan, they need a way to provide information on their identity. And there's huge potential here in financial inclusion, giving consumers without a digital footprint or credit history the opportunity to use telco relationships to assert their identity and validity as a customer. So thinking a little bit more then about telco and customer identity, all post-pay customers and prepaid customers in 155 countries around the world have to prove their identity in order to have a mobile telephony account. Now, in most cases, this is a time-consuming and manual process, adding really little to no value to the MNO or customer. So the customer is in many cases having to actually go into the store to provide proof of their identity, whether that's a passport, a driving license, a birth certificate. They're forced to go into the store. Now, telcos can leverage this regulatory requirement for SIM registration to become a provider of digital identity by using remote biometric-based SIM registration. So what do we mean here when we talk about biometric SIM registration? Effectively allowing the consumer to prove their identity to the telco via biometrics. So they can enroll with a driving license, a passport, another form of of physical identity. They simply take pictures of their identity documents, and they can register their SIM directly from their smartphone. They upload a selfie. The selfie is compared with the image and data on the identity document, something I'm sure all of us have done at one point or another. So this provides a much better customer experience. The consumer doesn't have to travel into a retail outlet to prove their identity. It's significant cost-saving opportunity for telcos because it's a fully automated process, 24/7, 365, and a much faster time to revenue for telco. So let's just look back and think about this. So we have telco with a huge source of data on the consumer, especially if you think about this in emerging markets where that consumer doesn't have a digital identity or even a digital footprint. And now there's this opportunity to register them online with biometric identity. So looking at the market as a whole, what's missing here? So telcos have made strides in mobile identity with authentication, but they still have a tremendous opportunity here. They've got a position of trust with both the end user and the enterprise, and it allows them to position themselves as a real linchpin in the digital identity ecosystem. But there's not a simple, easy to use, market ready solution for telcos to enter this space without significant CapEx and OpEx investment. So what's needed here? We believe a single SaaS-based identity as a service solution for telcos to quickly and easily deploy and operate is exactly what's needed in the market. So this is a solution that provides consumers with a digital identity set of credentials that they can use to verify their identity with third parties. It's based upon biometric SIM registration as the foundation of digital identity. Enriched with KYC, creditworthiness and network data, it helps protect against fraud and reduces friction between the consumer and the enterprise. And so we're naming the solution Digital Identity as a Service. So today, Infobip has a range of different digital identity solutions. We have mobile identity, which is taking those attributes that the operator holds, so the digital footprint of how the consumer uses their account on the mobile network, and that can be used for things like SIM swap checks. It can look for things like account tenure, how long has a consumer been a customer. It can look at ARPU, it can look at location, so there's all of these different data points. We are now launching biometric identity solutions to allow for the digital onboarding and digital SIM registration of customers. And our solution here, Digital Identity as a Service, is combining these two previously separate solutions into one, so that the telco can launch an end-to-end digital identity solution. And that creates a digital identity for the consumer in the process of onboarding them. Then they can allow that consumer to use that digital identity whenever they need to provide identity credentials to a third party. So effectively, imagine a scenario where a customer doesn't have a digital footprint. They don't have a digital identity, so they can't access all of these great new products and services being offered. They can't access the fintech stuff. They can't access mHealth and education because they have no way of asserting their identity. So the first step in all of this is SIM card registration, which is already a requirement in in many emerging economies. So that SIM registration requires an identity check, which can be done biometrically. So the consumer scans and uploads their facial recognition features. And that biometric enrollment creates a digital identity database at the telco that can be used for a range of use cases. Looking at this from a customer journey perspective, how does this all work? The customer starts by registering their SIM card via biometric authentication, and then effectively the telco is then creating a digital identity. That digital identity is bound with the user's facial profile, their MSISDN, and all the network attributes. So now the operator has created a full digital identity for the consumer, which is stored by Infobip on our solution, which I'll talk about a little bit later. So then let's think about an example where the consumer now wishes to apply for a loan with a third-party provider. They go onto the provider's website via their mobile device. They start to open a digital account. And at that point, they have to prove their identity. So they select an option which says, use my mobile network operator identity. So the user's passed back to the telco for verification. They upload a selfie, which is compared to the digital identity stored by the telco. And then the user is passed back to the loan company with a pass-fail of identity verification from the telco. And that includes a facial match, name and address match, account history with the telco, and more. So in this scenario, the telco has created a digital identity while the customer was onboarding the first time, and then they've allowed that user to leverage that identity to apply for a loan. So in this role, the telco is a broker of identity. So let's think about the value proposition. So for telco, there's a really significant revenue opportunity here. We know that biometrics and identity sectors are enjoying exponential growth at the moment. There's increased relevance for both the consumer and the enterprise. The telco is participating in the solving or going some way to solve the problem of the underbanked and the disintermediated from digital. They're protecting their users, which we know is a priority for MNOs. And from the consumer perspective, they're creating a digital identity with a trusted provider in a matter of minutes, 24/7, 365 from anywhere. And they can then use that identity to access digital products and services, fintech, banking. And we really think this is an absolute game changer. If you think about emerging markets where people are disintermediated, where they don't have an easy way to A, create a trusted digital identity, and B, assert that identity to enable them access to products and services, this can completely transform that conundrum in emerging markets. So thinking about the business model, how does this work? So firstly, as part of the biometric onboarding process, operators can significantly reduce OpEx. So they no longer have to have call center staff or retail agents onboarding customers and taking identity documentation. There's a tremendous revenue opportunity here. Infobip will create a marketplace for enterprises to buy identity verification and authentication. This is something we already do at the moment. And to give you an insight into the revenue opportunity, we're looking at between 2.5 cents for authentication for each event, up to $2 for verification onboarding per event. And from the cost side, the way Infobip are looking at deploying this is in a SaaS license, so no CapEx and no OpEx. Let's look a little bit at the technology, so identity in a box effectively. So today we already have a solution called iGate, which is an identity server deployed inside the network or as a SaaS product in the cloud, and it effectively connects internal APIs inside the operator to allow third-party enterprises to securely access identity credentials. So to give you a real-world example, we have a product called SIM Swap through iGate, where a bank can call iGate and say, I have this customer, can you tell me, have they swapped their SIM in the last 7 days? And we will, using iGate, query the operator's database and return a result to the bank. That's what iGate does today. So that's the monetization piece of identity attributes. We're now including biometric onboarding capability within iGate, meaning a complete identity as a service solution inside one box, from biometric onboarding to storage of identity profiles and monetization via third parties. It can be deployed and operational literally in a matter of weeks, and it's also integrated with Infobip's CPaaS suite of products. So how did we come up with a solution? Well, we're constantly looking to innovate at Infobip. We're always developing and researching new use cases for digital identity. So this solution is currently close to its rollout phase and is a real product of a concerted effort, product managers, developers, business staff, analysts. And we've also done a lot of discussions with regulators, NGOs, governmental departments, particularly in emerging markets, to understand the position in the market, understand where the challenges are and what we can solve. In terms of our competency for running this type of solution, well, we've been working with telcos for more than 15 years, more than 600 development staff, of which over a dozen are assigned to iGate alone. Our current mobile identity solution is GSMA Mobile Connect certified. And in fact, we were selected by GSMA in 2020 as its trusted global provider for mobile identity. So finally, the solution in practice, next steps. Well, we've got MI connectivity with dozens of MNOs worldwide, covering over 1 billion users, which is the perfect base for us to push out awareness of this end-to-end digital identity solution. We're pushing through further upgrades in the biometric capabilities to include voice and behavioral biometrics, as well as more AI applications. And we currently have iGate deployed at several MNOs, and the immediate next step for us is to add biometrics to those deployments and find a proof of concept client to roll out the full identity as a service product. So as I said before, we really believe that this is extremely innovative. We think this can be a game changer, particularly for telcos in emerging markets, where they can offer a completely seamless, frictionless mobile identity as a service. They can offer consumers the capability to create a digital identity literally in minutes as part of the onboarding process. And those consumers can then assert their identity towards banks, fintechs, insurance companies. And this is all done through our technology. It's effectively identity in a box. So one installation, either in the operator's data center or in the cloud, which would still have to be in the local territory so that data doesn't cross borders. But it's a very simple deployment, and we think a game changer. So thank you very much for your time and listening, and I'll be delighted to take any questions.